presenter is going to talk about lighting in its use in television and television studio lighting. Kathy Pryzgoda is also a PLDA member. She is a principal designer and owner of lightstudioLA. And previous to that, in her work in architectural lighting, spent 10 years doing television lighting, including work with CNN, World News Tonight, and the most impressive thing to be the Muppets. And so Kathy's also an instructor at UCLA's Extension School for Architecture and Interior Design at Santa Monica College. You're up.
I didn't realize how nervous I was going to be.
Yes.
I want to start this as I'm a theater designer, theatrical lighting designer. That's what I studied in school. And when Glenn asked me to do this, I realized doing TV, it's been a while since I did TV, but I realized something. Here's one of my favorite guys, Anderson Cooper, Jill knows him. Anderson, this is what, when I was in my late 20s, I realized I better get a real job outside of the theater and if I wanted to buy something better than a Chevy Chevette. And I had an opportunity to work in television. But what happened was, when I saw the image of a television screen, I was really disappointed. This is the kind of the work I was doing. I was learning about creating a feeling with light, creating a mood and focusing the eye, and all the sexiness of what the theater is what I fell in love with. I fell in love with, you know, the contrast of who's coming, the villain standing before her in this image from an opera. And I spent lots of late nights, like any other theater designer, waiting to go and focus a light, and also being very inspired by the music and the drama. And so when I actually was asked to work in television and realized I actually had to make a living, I went back to look at television images, and I'm like, oh my God, I love it, tetanus, what is that? Anyways, and I look at these and I go, well, what am I gonna do? I mean, do I have to make it look like this? And luckily I had a great mentor, Eric Siegel, who happens to be a director at World News Tonight, and he said, go back to the basics and look at somebody like Walter Cronkite. Well, when I look at this image, actually what I realize about the lighting is the beginnings of television was they were lighting from film techniques, which is lots of time, lots of edges, and especially something like film noir. This inspired me. I'm like, oh, wow, so I can light like this in television. Now, film noir is fabulous, but they also had film that was able to slow way down. They had a lot of time to set up shots. And that's what creates these beautiful images. If you actually look at the backstage of a film production, if anybody's ever seen one, here's one where there's probably about 6 lights. And maybe there's a little light focused just on her bust and a little light focused on her crown. And then they could take all day to get one shot. And actually, that's what I love about production. Now, this is a television studio from way back when. And one thing about the television image, as opposed to the film image, is you need a lot of light, especially at the beginning of television. So the lighting that was being produced was very flat, even light, which created the image. So that's kind of the history of it. This is a typical behind the scenes for a television shoot, perhaps. We have 10,000 watt Fresnels. I mean, anybody in architecture now, when was the last time you used a 10K? 5,000 watt Fresnels, 2,000 watt Fresnels. One thing about television lighting, even today, you still see that equipment being used. And now that I'm doing, and here is Walter Cronkite in another set, where he was blasted with light to get the image, and it was also, we were dealing with cameras that just couldn't read like what they can do now. But again, the thing about television lighting is because they had to get that image, it was lit so flatly. Well, back to theater for a minute. I was like, okay, so now I need to light something. I need to light a television show, but I'm really inspired by theater, which is focus. Look, I can focus somebody just by putting light on that guy, and we have some I don't know what's going on back there, but maybe it's his past, who knows what it is, but it tells a story. This was actually one of my first jobs jobs that I got to really play with, and this was Eric Siegel and I working together at ABC News for Peter Jennings, and I was truly inspired by Walter Cronkite. And one thing that happened when I actually landed in television world is there was something called cameras that could read low light. And actually, this is a set. I worked for 10 years on a show called Channel 1 News that nobody really saw, except maybe Jill over here. And because I knew nothing about television, I lit it like theater. And I spent 10 years lighting a high school kids news show. And this was an all-gray set that we could transform every single day. And this, if you notice Lisa Ling on the right, she's somewhat popular these days. A lot of anchors came out of this. But what was so fabulous about this 10 years is I was able to take my theatrical lighting, which was contrast and color, to create a mood and do this in a television format. And ultimately, I got to work more towards, kind of the more mainstream. This isn't that theatrical of an illuminated image. This is actually telling stories with the Tommy, which is the Muppets, Jim Henson Productions. But even doing the Muppets, and there's another slide coming that's a little more my style, is really theatrical. I mean, this stage was like this big. I mean, it was Muppets, and we had like 40 lights lighting this little scene. And it was all lit very theatrically. And what I realized as I put this presentation together is that I've been lighting like theater no matter what I do. Now this, if anybody recognizes, is the Chemisphere House, right? Well, it's actually a television studio that I lit for current television. And what had happened, by the time I worked on this project in TV, I had now been doing architecture, which is what I do now, architectural lighting. And I came from a very different direction, and I started, this is all fake. That's a photo image in the back. I used color, temperature, and all these techniques that I've learned in architecture to light television. So here, it's like I keep coming full circle back around to what makes lighting exciting, which is this contrast, which is, in this case, this is actually a shot of a theater piece, a dance piece, which is coming to the end of this presentation. I just thought this was a really beautiful image from the theater of a dancer. The colors, everything are just fabulous. He's got a little edge to him. We've got a little nice background. And finally, it's leading to what we've been really seeing, which is a scene from Survivor, shot on television, completely theatrically. And what we've done in terms of lighting, in terms of what the innovations and everything, I mean, without even talking about that, I think still what makes the image beautiful is when we think about contrast, we think about theater. Thank you.